Loading hot takes in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back into TwinTakes Fantasy Football, and I am so excited that the 2022 NFL season is finally here. All those mock drafts, all that research, all that prep over the summer has finally come to a culmination in just a few short days when Week 1 kicks off on Thursday night. So I've done some thinking since the last upload, and I think I've come to a conclusion about what's going to make the most sense for content uploads from this channel. So Tuesdays, I'm going to be doing the recap of the week previously, talking studs, duds, my picks for waiver pickups, guys you should target off the waiver wire, where you should spend your fab or spend your waiver priority, that sort of stuff. And then moving on to Thursday will be the weekend primer, talking about which games I'm looking at, kind of breaking down a few of the games, which ones I'm looking to exploit, which ones I'm staying away from, and then the guys that I'm picking that are going to be absolutely amazing for that weekend, all that sort of fun stuff. And then as we get into the season, not this first week, but after Week 1 is kicked off, there will be some short form, highly edited content posted on maybe Friday, Saturday-ish. So that's going to be super fun. Keep an eye out for that. I am still undecided on doing Dynasty content in season. I am an avid Dynasty player, but most times people are just focusing on the season that's occurring right now. And I'll leave Dynasty potentially towards the summer, post Super Bowl, that sort of stuff. So let's get into it. I'll kind of give you, since it's week 0, there's nothing to recap. Today's just going to be outlining what the Tuesday show is going to look like. And we're going to come in and we're going to start every Tuesday talking about some major NFL headlines from the past weekend, because no games have been played yet. I'm just going to talk about a couple headlines coming into the season that I think are really crucial. And that first headline is going to be addressing the absolute free agent frenzy we had this past summer and the copious number of wide receivers that changed teams. Now, if you're in my tiny corner of YouTube fantasy land, then you probably follow PFF and are very ingrained in fantasy. And I will say I really disagree on PFF when it comes to wide receivers. They value wide receivers and especially their WAR when it comes to changing teams as players that can absolutely elevate a team and be that piece that vaults them not only into the playoffs but into a Super Bowl range. I tend to disagree. I think that yes, talented wide receivers do make an impact, but wide receivers in good situations, their effect is exasperated. Their positive impact is exponentially enhanced based on the situation they're put in. If they're put into a worse situation, it's not going to improve it as much as people think. So that's where I really have a bone to pick with PFF's WAR and how they rate wide receivers, because they bring in a lot of different information that isn't exactly relevant to us fantasy heads. They bring into route running, breaking coverage, blocking, that sort of stuff that we don't care about, that we don't get points for. We get points for touchdowns, catches, and yards. So their grades might color fantasy perception of wide receivers for the worse, but I digress. I'm going to talk about the major ones where we see guys that people are super hyped on, but I'm kind of staying away from just because I perceive them going to worse situations. Firstly, it's Davante Adams. Now, Aaron Rodgers, back-to-back MVP. He's going to Derek Carr, who in his own right is a great quarterback, and there's something to be said for that college connection there, but no one's going to argue that Derek Carr is a worse quarterback than Aaron Rodgers. Plus, that O-line in Las Vegas really does concern me. They just cut Alex Leatherwood, their first-round pick last year, and I can't really name any sort of star or someone that's going to hold down the offensive line out there in Las Vegas. And Davante Adams, he does it all, but don't get me wrong, there's a lot of points that he scored because his routes took time to develop. He's an elite route runner, but what happens if Derek Carr is forced to get rid of the ball before that route has time to develop? That's what I think it's going to be facing a lot with, given the situation with that O-line in Las Vegas, and really, really concerns me for not only Adams, but the Raiders' production as a whole. Tyreek Hill, this one's much worse than even Adams' transition from Green Bay to Las Vegas. As I've gone on record, I've made my statements and feelings about Tyreek Hill very, very clear. He was a massively volatile and inconsistent fantasy asset prior to Patrick Mahomes becoming the starting quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I believe going down to that Miami offense, he is going to regress to an asset that is way overvalued in the third round ADP currently, and is going to submarine your team multiple times per year, or multiple times this coming season. At wide receiver, A.J. Brown, I believe he went to a more neutral script. So I understand that people are still very high on him and his ADP has been rising. However, I like the value in the third round. I think it's just going to be more of the same. The offense in Philly is the same, if not a little bit better than what it was in Tennessee. However, in Tennessee, he was a clear uncontested alpha in that offense. There's going to be a little bit more offensive playmakers in Philly that are going to take away from him. Devontae Smith is excellent in his own right. Dallas Goedert is a tremendous tight end who already has a rapport with Jalen Hurts. But A.J. Brown apparently is best friends with Jalen Hurts. There's no college connection, but there certainly is a rapport that's been built up prior to A.J. Brown being traded, and I expect him to just keep on keeping on, being the same A.J. Brown we have come to know and love in the Titans offense, a massive big body target down the field, a massive red zone target, and I think his production will stay pretty similar, but I don't think it's going to elevate the Eagles or elevate his fantasy performance the way people are kind of hyping it up to be at the moment. Finally, we're getting to Hollywood Brown, who I do like a lot because he has demonstrated amazing talent, but he's going to a much better situation. He's coming from an offense in the Ravens that is really, really run dominant, where he was a secondary target behind the tight end and Mark Andrews. Now he's coming into a system that's basically an air raid offense under Cliff Kingsbury. He does have that lauded college connection with Kyler, and with Zach Ertz potentially being out for the first game, DeAndre Hopkins being suspended for 6 games at this point, and then there's no guarantee that he's going to be healthy when he comes back. He was very injury prone the past couple years. Christian Kirk is gone, so there's going to be a ton of opportunity for him in that offense. There's going to be a ton of Kyler just throwing the ball down to his college buddy. And I think that Hollywood Brown, because of the situation that he's put in, even though he's by far the worst wide receiver of the 4 that I've talked about here, he's going to take the biggest leap as far as fantasy production comes because of the situation that he's now been put in. So I'm going with situation over the actual talent of the wide receivers, but this is certainly the year to pay attention to what happens when wide receivers change teams and how that impacts their fantasy value and how they perform and how the team as a whole performs with that potential upgrade at wide receiver. Now, on the inverse, the second headline I want to talk about is the recent utilization of young wide receivers. So it appears that between the extreme that is PFF and the extreme that is myself, the NFL finds itself split down the middle. They have some people who are willing to invest tons of money and make wide receiver the most valuable position on their team, while there's still plenty of other teams who would rather not spend that money, trade away their current high-profile wide receiver, and then invest in young talent. Now, it wasn't so long ago that we saw one of the most lauded wide receiver classes, which was 2020. That's the class that had Lamb, Judy, Ruggs, and Jefferson. And I distinctly remember that Ruggs and Lamb were going in rounds 14 and 15 of drafts. Judy was going undrafted, and Jefferson definitely wasn't going drafted. And people were picking up Jefferson off the waiver wire in week 6, 7, 8 when he was finally getting incorporated in that offense. And he was winning people championships because of his production his rookie year. Now, fast forward a couple years, we had Jamar Chase, who was a 5th round ADP last year. We have Drake London, who's a 6th to 7th round ADP this year. So we can see that the fantasy community's attitude towards young wide receivers has drastically changed. No longer are they being held on to and slowly eased into an offense for 1 to 2 to 3 years. They're being brought into an offense and being expected to perform immediately. Obviously, Treylon Burks was drafted to bring in and really replace A.J. Brown. And at one point, I was hearing rumors in Dynasty that Treylon Burks was probably the 3rd best fantasy prospect behind Kenneth Walker and Breece Hall, just because of the opportunity that he was being thrust into and the role that he was going to take year 1. So this is because of the insane free agent frenzy that happened this past year when the shuffling of wide receivers. This is also going to give us a great look about, is this trend going to continue of talented wide receivers coming in and becoming the alphas immediately? And are we just going to have to, in order to win fantasy leagues, take more and more upside shots on rookie wide receivers that we haven't seen in the NFL? So my guess would be yes. I think these athletes are coming into the NFL more and more pro ready than ever. And in order to stay fantasy relevant, you will have to be drafting these rookie wide receivers much higher than even just 2 years ago with that 2022 class I just mentioned, which is why I took a share of Drake London in literally every single draft I was a part of. I'm very, very high on him this year. The last headline that I want to talk about from this offseason is that this is a massive year for quarterbacks. It is a huge make or break year for a lot of quarterbacks, especially a few that are fantasy relevant that I'm going to talk about here. Now, 2023 is not just, it's one of the most historic draft classes we've seen in a long time. Not only are the running backs absolutely insane, not only the wide receivers absolutely insane, but this is one of the best QB classes that we have seen in a long time. Bryce Young looked amazing this past weekend. I thought CJ Stroud would have been the clear number one pick after this weekend. CJ Stroud, he did everything I wanted him to do. Bryce Young did everything and more. So it's not even that I'm falling on CJ Stroud. He made a ton of throws that were incredible NFL level throws, and I love the decision-making process that he had in his game against Notre Dame. However, Bryce Young just looked otherworldly, and his athleticism and arm talent were off the charts. So I think between Young, Stroud, Levis, Van Dyke, Anthony Richardson, there's just an immense amount of QB talent coming into the league, and this is where we're going to see a lot of those quarterbacks. It's really a make or break year for them. And this is because even though they're highly drafted and highly valued in fantasy, that doesn't exactly translate in the real NFL. Think back a few years with Jameis Winston's last year in Tampa Bay. He was the QB4 overall, and he got axed at the end of that year. So clearly fantasy greatness and real life greatness are not correlated in the slightest. So some guys that I'm keeping an eye on are Jalen Hurts. This team is built to win now. They had Howie does what Howie does. He brought in CGJ to strengthen the backside. James Bradbury had an amazing draft class with some great picks in Nakobe Dean, and Jordan Davis out of Georgia, the athletic freak that he is. They traded for A.J. Brown. This team is built to win now. However, as we've seen in the past, this NFL that we're in right now, average quarterbacks aren't going to take you to the promised land. Average quarterbacks get you to the playoffs and then get you absolutely smoked. So just the talent level that is present currently in the NFL, you need elite playmakers at elite positions like the quarterback in order to take you to that big game. And we've seen what a tremendous difference that absolute elite playmaker quarterback can make to a team, a la the Bengals and Joe Burrow last year. So if Hurts struggles out the gate and the Eagles come out to a 4-4 start and they're looking like they're going to miss the playoffs, you might have to pivot. I know Hurts was probably a 5th, 6th round ADP, and people are really banking on him to be their fantasy winner. But if he starts struggling, there's going to be no motive for Sirianni and the Eagles to really push for the playoffs. They're going to really more focus on draft position, see what they're going to do in order to upgrade that one position that they think they need in quarterback. And you might even see Hurts being sat for Gardner Minshew down the ending stretch of the season if Jalen Hurts starts to struggle throughout the year, because if this is his year to prove it, or they're going to move on. They have the draft capital to take a high-end quarterback next year. So don't draft Jalen Hurts and just pretend like you never have to worry about quarterback for the rest of the year. It's just something that you do have to keep your eye on. Same thing with Tua being drafted in the same class as Burrow and Justin Herbert. He looks far paltry compared to them. They brought in Mike McDaniels. Same thing as Eagles. They traded for Tyreek Hill. They had a tremendous draft class, and all the pieces are there. I'm pretty sure the ownership and the coaching staff down there in Miami feels that they have the pieces in place and the defense and the supporting cast to win a Super Bowl right now. And if Tua can't be that game-breaking difference and can't be that difference maker at QB, I believe they will move on from him and try to figure out a different solution at quarterback. Probably not through the draft, given the recent suspension and forfeiture of draft picks. They'll probably try to go for a little bit more elder statesman, but if you're banking on Tua as a late round flyer at quarterback, you might want to be able to pick up some backups just in case he starts to flounder down the stretch and they lose confidence in him. Trey Lance, same thing. He's a rookie. He's going to have growing pains, and it wasn't a concern until they re-signed Jimmy Garoppolo. So if Trey Lance starts to struggle, he's still a rookie. There are still some throws that concern me. It seems like he relies more on his athleticism rather than trying to actually read and decipher the game the way a pro quarterback should. And if they start to struggle, they're another team that has the pieces in place to make a deep playoff push. And Jimmy's done it for them before. So if Lance starts to struggle, Shanahan might be pretty quick to throw in Jimmy Garoppolo in order to kind of salvage the season. So make sure that, again, just monitor Trey Lance. Don't just set it and forget it for the rest of the season. And finally, this one really hurts to say because I'm the biggest Lamar fan. I'm not a Ravens fan, but I'm the biggest Lamar fan you will ever find. I love him as a person. He is so smart, articulate, funny, engaging, sociable, charitable, nice. Like, cannot say enough good things about this guy, but the contract situation does worry me. The Ravens in and of themselves are very confident in their ability to draft talent and how they evaluate players. Clearly, there's been some rumors coming out of Eric DeCosta's office that they aren't budging on what they're willing to offer Lamar, and Lamar apparently is asking for a lot more guaranteed money than they're willing to give him just based on what they value him as a player. And I could see this very quickly turning into a situation where they slap the franchise tag on him and then they move on because that's how confident they are in their evaluation of players and that's how they draft. I know a lot of these situations seem pretty ridiculous, but it's a non-zero chance of happening, and these are players from the quarterback position where just because of the talent that's coming in next year, this is a make or break year for a lot of guys. So we'll wrap up. I know that was kind of a longer section. Hopefully when we talk about those NFL headlines in season, it will be shorter and more condensed, but again, just want to talk about some headlines. We'll do a recap of the weekend, the biggest things bearing down on the fantasy community. Next, we're going to talk about grading my guys. So on Thursday's show, I will be picking 5 guys that I'm super confident in that you should have confidence in starting to, whether they're just, they're a fringe flex decision, maybe they're a waiver pickup, or maybe they've just had a really bad run of games. But I'm not going to say, Derrick Henry, smash play. No, I'm not. It's not going to be those kind of players. It's going to be a little bit more a deeper cut. But these guys that I'm really confident in fantasy. And then right now, I'll put up a graphic and we'll grade my picks and see how well I evaluated and see how well my picks did. Who knows? But going to put it on a record and going to keep myself accountable. Right now, the graphics is not applicable because no games are played this past weekend. And then moving on, we're going to do studs and duds. We'll start out with the studs. And since, again, no players to evaluate, since nothing was played this past weekend, we'll just kind of reaffirm some of my league winners that I've talked about in previous videos. Again, pretty quick bullet points here. DeAndre Swift, he is by far the most talented asset on that Lions offense, a versatile weapon both in the running and the passing game. Not many other offensive assets to really threaten his production. We've seen the highs that he can reach based on what he was doing last year before the injury befell him Thanksgiving weekend. And listen, they're in a really easy conference, and the Lions have the 5th easiest strength of schedule this year. I expect DeAndre Swift and that Lions offense to take a jump, and he will be a top 3 running back in my opinion. Stephon Diggs, with so much wide receiver craziness, he is my guy to repeat as the wide receiver 1. He is in the age range that we do see wide receiver 1s occur. He just got paid this offseason. We talked about the vacated targets ad nauseum, 172 vacated targets from Beasley and Sanders leaving. Yes, I understand that I made a video and made a Twitter post about how those targets are inflated. It's actually more about, in actuality, it's more like 140 vacated targets if you account for the additional games and the regression of Stephon Diggs. However, I just think that in that offense, if the Bills are really this MVP caliber, Josh Allen quarterback, Super Bowl favorite team, it was a little bit of a down year for Stephon Diggs, but he's paid. He's going to be part of this offense. He is the star. He will have a little bit of a bounce back to another great year. And at the end of the first round, he was definitely a guy I was targeting, and I got him on my team. So very happy about that. Already talked about this guy, Marquise Brown. Again, will be a league winner from that kind of wide receiver mystery box range of the 4th to 7th round. Again, so he's a guy that gave me Stephon Diggs vibes when Stephon Diggs went to Buffalo. Again, a guy that has flashed immense talent, going to a much better situation with a better passing quarterback. Maybe not a better passing quarterback. I do take that back. Not a better passing quarterback than Kyler, but a quarterback that's definitely more willing to air out the ball. Aaron Jones, again, a dual threat in both the passing and receiving game. Aaron Rodgers is a guy that only really involves players that he trusts, and he really values veterans. I don't expect Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs to come in and have a major impact on this offense, especially if this really random rumor that Allen Lazard has now come out and is dealing with some undisclosed injury. There's not too many guys that have the veteran tenure that Aaron Jones has, and he will definitely be Rodgers' best weapon in both facets of the game in that Green Bay offense. And again, really weak NFC, should put up a ton of points. Finally, Travis Etienne. The Jaguars, I expect Trevor Lawrence to take a step, not only because it's his sophomore year and he's more acquainted with the NFL, but also because they got rid of the worst coach in the history of the NFL in Urban Meyer. And they also traded away Laviska Shenault. They cut Laquan Treadwell. They have not added any other offensive weapons. So they're really, Etienne and J-Rob, I guess, are going to be their bread and butter of that offense. Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram. Outside of that, I can barely name another player who plays offense. Marvin Jones, I'm pretty sure he's still in that offense, but I'm anticipating a ton of volume coming to Etienne's way this season from both a running and a pass catching standpoint. And we've already talked about pass catching running backs are a cheat code for fantasy, and this the value that he had. I think if you were taking him in drafts in the 4th round, that was one of the best picks looking back on it. All right, moving over. Now we're going to get to a little bit more dour note. We're going to talk about some duds of the past weekend. So I'm just going to reaffirm some of the guys that I'm down on this year. And first off, no surprise to anyone, Tyreek Hill. Talked about this ad nauseum. Inconsistent, volatile offense, worse offense, worse quarterback, hitting that age where wide receivers tend to regress. I like Waddle as one in that offense. No, just no, stay away. Secondly, David Montgomery. Nothing in the preseason has done anything to mitigate my concerns around DeMont over here. I don't believe in the Bears offense whatsoever. It looks abysmal in preseason. Justin Fields looks scared and was running for his life behind maybe the worst O-line I've seen thrown out on the field in the past decade. David Montgomery is still taking snaps with the special teams, and the new regime has no loyalty to him whatsoever. So and plus he's just injury prone. Again, we talked a lot about tight ends and why I don't like their value, especially in deeper leagues at the top of the draft. Again, I believe that positional advantage is inflated. Point in case, we'll just talk about Kyle Pitts here. If Kyle Pitts was reassigned to wide receiver at this moment, I think he would immediately fall to a 5th round pick. I think that the reason why he gets that 2-round bump up to the 3rd round currently is that, again, tight end positional advantage that people are so in on. However, I'm looking for guys that, regardless of their position, are going to win me weeks. And if I'm looking at a wide receiver, if we're comparing Michael Pittman in the 3rd to Kyle Pitts in the 3rd, I'm taking the guy that can absolutely just dominate and has an overall better point total. Listen, you're trying to win. You're trying to maximize your point totals. I'm not taking a guy at the tight end position who's going to cap my upside when he has to do other duties along that offensive line. Number 4, Javonte Williams, just a handcuff with Melvin Gordon. I don't believe in Russell Wilson. He actually showed a lot of regression in his passing metrics prior to the thumb injury, and he looked even worse after the thumb injury. So I don't think Russell Wilson will be the biggest upgrade that people are talking about in Denver. I think that Melvin Gordon will still be heavily involved when they re-signed him, and just a lot of those factors are going to put me off Javonte for right now. I could be proven wrong. I hope I am. I love the talent of him, and listen, if these guys prove me wrong, I am happy because it means a guy did well, and I'm never going to be mad at a guy for doing well. Finally, T. Higgins. This is just kind of like the offseason storyline that I've been propagating about the Bengals. I think that their Super Bowl run did just artificially inflate a lot of their ADP, whether it's Burrow, Higgins, Mixon. T. Higgins, a lot of his value as a wide receiver comes from taking defenders away from Jamar Chase and helping Jamar Chase get open, and that's obviously not a trait that we get rewarded for here in fantasy. I think that Zach Taylor and that offense is going to try to stabilize that offense. They obviously put a lot more assets into the defensive side in the draft and signed the offensive linemen. So I think they're going to try to control games a little bit more, not have to rely on these massive shootouts where it's 41-37, and with a lot less offensive points being scored, it's going to obviously impact the offensive weapons negatively. And I believe T. Higgins as a second wide receiver 2, clearly in that offense, is going to be the one that definitely gets hurt the most. So there we go. We'll just wrap up some studs, some duds, kind of recap my thoughts on them. Laud guys are doing well. Poo-poo guys who, really let us down and maybe sunk your team. I expect to see Tyreek Hill on there a few times. That's my prediction. And obviously we're going to put some waiver pickups. Right now, no really waivers to go through, but I'll give you some guys that, maybe are floating around that you might want to pick up before the start of the season. The first guy is a guy I've been banging the drum for, Tyler Algier. This guy is so good. I've loved everything I've seen in the preseason. One of the best runners in this class, I think. Someone said a tweet today, and I'm really kicking myself. Don't remember who sent it out, but he said Tyler Algier could be the guy that we want Dameon Pierce to be. And yeah, I was taking in early mock drafts back in July before Dameon Pierce skyrocketed to the moon. I was taking, Dalvin Cook, Saquon in the first 2 rounds. Then round 10 and 11, I would take Dameon Pierce and Tyler Algier because they're both pretty similar. Obviously, Dameon Pierce is more talented and has more opportunity, but I think Tyler Algier is not that far behind. Again, they're both on bad offenses, but they're both not surrounded by a ton of playmaking weapons, and the path to the field is clear. I've detailed this, that Cordero Patterson is really the only impediment for Algier making it to that number 1 running back spot, and with Cordero Patterson's age, I don't expect him to last the full season. Even last year, he couldn't last more than 7 or 8 games before he started hitting it with injuries and couldn't really sustain any fantasy production. So I think Tyler Algier is a guy to definitely keep an eye on and will be one of those rookie running backs that make an impact. Picking him up in any leagues that I can. Secondly, this second waiver pickup is inspired by the offseason drama between Jacques Peterson and Tommy Pham. If you don't know the story, Jacques Peterson had a guy go on IR for COVID, picked up Jeff Wilson Jr., put him on his bench and stashed him there while having guys in his IR spot. Tommy Pham didn't like that, slapped him, got fined, yada, yada, yada. Okay, Jacques Peterson, in my opinion, was right. This is your roster. If you have roster spots and it allows you to do it, utilize your roster to its max potential. This is why with the last pick of most drafts, especially in leagues that have smaller benches, I am picking up Jameson Williams. He was by far and away the best wide receiver talent in this draft class. He would have been the number 1 wide receiver off the board if not for that ACL injury. If I'm assuming that a lot of leagues implemented IR spots last year because of COVID, and most people don't like to take things away. So I'm assuming a lot of people still have those IR spots in their league. Utilize them. Get players who are injured, throw them in your IR spot, utilize your bench and your roster to its max capacity. If I have to drop Jameson Williams, if one of my main guys gets hurt, who cares? I'll drop him. But right now, I'm able to throw him there and stash one more player than every other roster in my league. Take advantage of it, utilize it, be smart about how you take your roster, pick up injured guys. If Jameson Williams is there, I would recommend him, but you can also take other guys who are marked out for this upcoming game, throw them in the IR, pick up another guy. Number 3, just a really deep sleeper that a lot of buzz has been happening about is Joshua Palmer. He's just a really, really talented wide receiver. I believe he's the only wide receiver the Chargers have utilized first or second day draft capital on since Mike Williams. Keenan Allen has a little bit of an injury history, so does Mike Williams. And even Austin Eckler has come out in a lot of podcasts and really spent a ton of time talking about how good this Joshua Palmer kid is. This is his sophomore year. I expected him to take a massive jump. And they're saying that he's going to be utilized in this offense, and if something happens to one of those 2 guys in Williams and or Keenan Allen, Joshua Palmer is going to be absolutely insane in that offense. We know Justin Herbert's a top 3 quarterback in the league. He throws the ball all over the field. Joshua Palmer is a guy that, should anything happen to anyone on that team, and I'm not going to be super high on him if he stays as a wide receiver 3. I think he will have some weeks where he'll go off for a touchdown and 50 yards and would be definitely a good flex spot, but if something happens to one of those main wide receivers, Joshua Palmer is going to be the waiver wire ad of the year. Mark my words. Number 4, obviously it's a little early in the year. The injury bug hasn't really bitten any teams too badly, but there obviously is a lot of concern around J.K. Dobbins. So if you're in a deep league and you're really, fishing for week 1 start, Ravens, they play the Jets. Mike Davis is currently slated to be the RB1 on that team. It is the most dynamic running offense of any team in the NFL. If J.K. Dobbins is ruled out, Mike Williams would not be a bad flex start for me. And finally, the last waiver pickup. Again, no games have been played, so it's hard to kind of adjust any rankings from when we did our draft. But if you really are unsure what to do with the last spot on your bench, just go ahead and grab Jeff Wilson Jr. We know Kyle Shanahan has zero loyalty to his running backs. Elijah Mitchell has been struggling with a lingering issue, and who knows, he might not even start because of how fickle Kyle Shanahan is with his running backs. We've seen that Jeff Wilson is still really productive, even a little bit older back. But there's going to be at some point where Jeff Wilson, one of those San Francisco running backs, San Francisco is another one of those more dynamic rushing offenses, really amazing play calls and really creative play calls with Kyle Shanahan. So having a piece of that infinity gauntlet that is the San Francisco running back room is never a bad thing if you have an open waiver spot. So that's going to wrap up the waiver wire section for today. Kind of a little bit on the longer side for the videos, but hopefully that gives you an idea of what it's going to look like every Tuesday for a weekly recap. And I'm looking forward to talking to you guys Thursday and priming you guys for week 1 of the NFL season. Take care.